Hey everybody, and welcome back to Sip and Talk.
Back again.
You know, sometimes I feel like my brain is just like full of tabs.
Yeah.
You know, like too many tabs open.
Oh, yeah.
And this week it's been like stuck on how many times can I reheat coffee before it just tastes like sadness?
Oh, no.
Spoiler alert, the limit does exist.
No.
So how's your mental browser doing today? Anything a little less
Less caffeinated.
less caffeinated, less existential?
Well, you know, my existential question of the week has been, does a group of pigeons qualify as a pigeon cloud?
Whoa. That's deep.
I still haven't landed on a definitive answer.
I like it.
But speaking of things that are a little bit more grounded, did you see what's happening over in the Red Sea?
Oh, yeah.
Things are getting a little intense over there.
Yeah, the whole thing with the Houthis in Yemen, it's kind of blowing up everywhere right now.
Yeah.
Threatening ships. The U.S. is getting involved.
Yeah.
It feels like one of those things that you read about in history books. And you're like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's happening right now.
It's happening right now.
So that is what we are diving into today.
Big time.
You send over a ton of information.
A lot of stuff.
And we're going to try and break it down for you guys.
Yeah.
What is happening in the Red Sea?
Yeah.
What even counts as terrorism?
Right.
And then maybe even some like future implications.
Exactly. Think of this as your like express lane to understanding what's a really complex situation.
I like that.
We sifted through the noise so you don't have to.
Yeah.
Let's start with the Red Sea business. What is going on over there? Why is it so important?
Yeah, so the Red Sea, it's not just some random body of water.
Right.
It is like the superhighway of the sea.
Yes.
You know, it connects the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean through the Suez Canal.
Yeah.
So if that highway gets blocked, it's a massive global trade traffic jam.
Yeah, it's a huge problem. And the group that is causing the slowdown is the Houthi organization in Yemen.
Oh.
They are aligned with Iran.
Iran again?
Iran again.
They always seem to be right in the thick of things.
Yeah, always in the middle.
Yeah.
So they've controlled a large part of Yemen since 2014.
Okay.
And really importantly, they control a lot of that Red Sea coastline, which is super strategically important.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. It's a very strategic location.
Absolutely.
So what are they actually doing to these ships, though?
So since November of last year,
they've
been launching these attacks on vessels in the Red Sea.
Uh-huh.
They're saying that they're doing it to show solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza.
Okay.
And that they're specifically going after ships that they believe are linked to Israel in some way.
So is it actually like causing problems for global trade?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I've heard that there are delays and stuff.
Yeah, big problems.
Okay.
About 15% of all sea trade globally goes through the Red Sea.
Wow.
So because of these attacks, shipping companies are being forced to take the long way around Africa.
All around the tip.
Around the Cape of Good Hope.
Yeah.
Which adds weeks to their journey and drives the cost up significantly. Yeah. So this Red Sea crisis, it really shows how fragile those just-in-time global supply chains are.
Yeah.
You know, where a conflict in one little area can actually affect the entire global economy.
Yeah, you don't really think about all that stuff,
Yeah.
you know, until it's like, oh, my coffee's more expensive.
Right, exactly.
Oh, my whatever is delayed.
Yeah.
So how many attacks are we talking about here?
It's been pretty relentless.
Really?
Between October of 2023 and March of this year, there have been over 60 ships attacked, according to one source.
Wow.
2 ships have been sunk, 1 was seized,
Jeez.
and at least 4 mariners have been killed.
Oh, wow.
And since November alone, we're looking at over 100 attacks.
That's wild.
It's hard to even imagine the level of disruption that is causing.
Yeah, like that's not a small number.
It's not a small number at all.
Right, that's a huge number.
Yeah.
So what are they using to attack these ships?
So primarily they're using drones and missiles.
Okay.
And these attacks are really heavily concentrated in a place called the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which is this very narrow but super important choke point at the south end of the Red Sea.
Oh.
But it's not just been like cargo ships.
Oh, really?
There's been some pretty bold attacks, or at least claims of attacks. So in January of 2025, they claimed that they hit the Israeli Defense Ministry headquarters with a hypersonic missile.
Well, hold on. Hypersonic?
Hypersonic.
That's like super fast, right?
Super fast.
Like, why is that significant?
Yeah, so hypersonic missiles travel at many times the speed of sound, making them extremely difficult to intercept.
Oh, wow.
So even if the details of this attack are debated,
right,
that claim signals a pretty big jump in the threat that they pose.
Yeah, that's That's not something to take lightly.
No.
And they also claim that they attacked the U.S. aircraft carrier.
Yeah, the USS Harry S. Truman and its escort ships.
Like they're going after the U.S. now.
Yeah, going after a U.S. aircraft carrier, that's a major escalation for sure.
So what's the U.S. doing about this?
Yeah.
I mean, they can't just sit there.
No, they can't just sit there, and they haven't. They launched this operation called Operation Prosperity Guardian, which is this multinational effort to try and protect shipping in the Red Sea.
Okay.
And in addition to that, the U.S. and the U.K. have been carrying out airstrikes against Houthi targets in Yemen since January of this year.
So what kind of places are they hitting? Are we talking like their headquarters or what?
So the focus is on taking away their ability to launch these attacks.
Right.
So they're hitting things like underground storage facilities where they keep their weapons.
Okay.
Missile launch sites and surveillance equipment.
So basically trying to weaken them militarily.
Yeah, disrupt and degrade their capabilities. That's the official line.
Okay. But is it actually working? Are the attacks like slowing down at all?
Well, it's not totally clear yet.
Yeah, okay.
The U.S. has said that they're going to keep carrying out these strikes until the Houthis stop attacking.
Okay.
And the previous administration also increased sanctions pressure on Iran because of their support for the Houthis.
So it's kind of like a two-pronged approach, right?
Yeah, military pushback and economic pressure.
Okay. I also saw some stuff about the Houthis like announcing ceasefires, but then also like making more threats.
It's been a real back and forth.
Yeah.
There have been a few ceasefires announced, but almost always with some kind of condition tied to what's happening in Gaza.
Oh, so they're really connecting these two things.
Yeah, really connecting them. So, for example, in January of 2025, they announced a ceasefire that was related to Gaza, but said that they would start attacking again if Israel violated it.
Oh, so it's not really a ceasefire.
A very conditional ceasefire.
Super conditional.
Yeah, and shortly after that, they said that they would stop targeting ships that weren't linked to Israel.
Okay.
But then they threatened to retaliate if they themselves were attacked.
So it's like, I'll stop if you stop, but if you even look at me funny.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Okay. So what other threats have they made?
So in February, they warned that they would resume attacks if the ceasefire in Gaza fell apart.
Okay.
Or if the U.S. and Israel went ahead with the plan to displace Palestinians from Gaza. And then in March, they gave Israel 4 days to get humanitarian aid into Gaza, or they said they would start attacking ships again.
Wow. Okay, so it seems like this Red Sea situation is really tied up with this bigger Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Yeah, you can't really separate the two.
Complicated.
Very complicated.
Yeah. Okay, so we know the shipping companies are taking detours because of all this.
Right.
But what's the bigger economic impact here? Are we all just going to be paying more for everything because of this?
It's a real concern.
Yeah.
These detours that these big shipping companies have to take add huge costs.
Right.
And those costs usually get passed on to consumers.
Right.
JP Chase estimated that these disruptions in the Red Sea could increase global core goods inflation by something like 0.7%.
Wow.
In the first half of 2024.
Okay, so we're talking about groceries and gas and everything.
Pretty much everything.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
It is a big deal. And we've also seen this massive drop in traffic through the Suez Canal.
Oh, yeah.
So, for example, in November of 2023, only 115 container ships went through.
Huge drop.
So is there any agreement on whether bombing the Houthis is actually the right move here?
There's definitely debate about that.
Yeah.
Some sources are describing the military response as more of a Band-Aid.
Okay.
Like a temporary fix.
Right.
Rather than a long-term solution.
Yeah, like it's not actually addressing the root of the problem.
Right, exactly. The Houthis have shown that they're really resilient.
Okay.
And they've kept attacking despite the airstrikes.
So what does that mean? Is it like a whack-a-mole situation?
It kind of feels that way.
Yeah.
You know, you hit them in one spot and they pop up in another.
Right.
So just trying to take away their military power from the air might not be enough to stop them completely.
Yeah. Okay. So is the rest of the world just kind of watching this happen?
Well, the UN Security Council did pass Resolution 2722,
okay,
which condemns the Houthi attacks and says how important freedom of navigation is in the Red Sea.
And of course, Iran's support for the Houthis is a big piece of this puzzle too.
Right.
And that's adding to the tension in the region, especially with all the U.S. sanctions and warnings against Iran.
So there's a lot of moving pieces here.
A lot of moving pieces.
Yeah, a lot of players. It's a big mess.
Yeah. It kind of makes you think about the word terrorism, though. You know, we keep hearing about the Houthis and other groups being labeled as terrorist organizations.
Yeah.
Well, what does that actually mean?
It's a good question.
Yeah, like how do you officially say, yep, that's a terrorist organization? It just feels like a really loaded term.
You're hitting on something really important here. defining what is and isn't a terrorist organization or a terrorist act is super complex, and it's often very controversial.
Yeah.
But from the research that we've done, it seems like the general understanding is that terrorist organizations are non-state actors.
Okay, so non-state meaning they're not an official government.
Exactly. Like they're operating outside of a country's official military or political structure. Okay, so it's like a group, not a country.
Right. And a key part of the definition is that they use or threaten to use violence against civilians.
Okay.
And their goals are usually political or religious or ideological.
So it's not just about like blowing stuff up. It's about who's doing it and why.
Exactly. It's about the motivation.
Okay. What about official definitions, though? Like, how does the FBI define terrorism?
Well, the FBI actually makes a distinction between international and domestic terrorism.
Okay.
So international terrorism is when you have violent acts that are inspired by or connected to designated foreign terrorist organizations or groups that are backed by states.
Okay.
And domestic terrorism is more about things that are focused on pushing a domestic agenda.
Okay.
So like political or religious or social beliefs.
So they're trying to change things within their own country.
Exactly.
And the U.S. State Department keeps that list of foreign terrorist organizations, right?
Yeah, the FTO list.
The FTO list.
Yeah, so the Secretary of State is the one who puts groups on that list,
Yeah.
based on whether their activities are considered a threat to the security of the United States.
Okay. So there's like an official stamp of terrorist.
Yeah.
But it still feels like that word carries a lot of baggage with it.
It does.
I remember reading something about how it's not really a neutral term.
Yeah, you're right. And scholar Bruce Hoffman, he makes a really interesting point about this. He says that terrorism is a term that has a lot of negative feelings attached to it.
Right.
And it's often used to label enemies or people that we disagree with politically.
So it's like instantly putting someone in the bad guy category.
Exactly.
Okay. So how do we then tell the difference between terrorism and like when one country invades another and innocent people get hurt?
That's a key distinction.
Right, because that's terrifying too.
It is terrifying, but usually when a state invades another state and people die, it's considered an act of war.
Okay.
And that's covered by international law, things like the Geneva Conventions and international humanitarian law. But terrorism by non-state groups is usually seen as different because its main goal is to spread fear.
So it's about the intention.
Yeah, it's about the intention. War is about achieving a military victory.
Right.
Terrorism is about scaring people into doing what you want.
Okay. And usually it's these non-governmental groups doing the scaring.
Right.
Okay. What about this term state terrorism? I've heard that before.
Yeah, so state terrorism is basically terrorism that's carried out by a government.
So a government acting like a terrorist group.
Yeah, there's a lot of debate among experts about whether that term is accurate.
Okay.
But officially, the U.S. definitions from the FBI and the State Department, they don't usually label states as terrorist organizations.
Okay.
Instead, they might call them state sponsors of terrorism,
Right.
like Iran or North Korea,
Okay.
if they're found to be supporting non-state terrorist groups.
So it's tricky.
It's very nuanced.
Yeah. Okay. This leads me to a bit of a what-ifs question. Based on some of the things we've looked at, could a country like China ever be considered a terrorist organization?
That's an interesting thought.
I know it sounds a little out there,
Yeah.
but, thinking about things like information warfare, espionage, stealing intellectual property, even possibly invading Taiwan.
Yeah.
Could any of that cross the line into terrorism?
So if we look at each of those things,
Okay.
information warfare, while it can be really damaging and disruptive,
Right.
it doesn't usually involve that direct physical violence against civilians
Okay.
with the goal of spreading fear in the same way that terrorism does.
Okay.
Espionage is about gathering information. It's a secret activity, but it doesn't meet that violent threshold of terrorism.
Right.
Stealing intellectual property is a crime,
Yeah.
often with big economic consequences.
Right.
But again, it doesn't involve violence or that deliberate spreading of fear among regular people.
Okay. What about something like an invasion of Taiwan?
So if China were to invade Taiwan,
Yeah.
under international law, that would be considered an act of war. Okay.
Between two states?
Right.
It wouldn't matter how China tried to frame it,
Okay.
like calling it reunification or liberation.
Right.
It would still be an act of war.
Okay.
Unless, and this is really important,
Yeah.
unless they were specifically and deliberately targeting civilians to spread terror among the Taiwanese people.
Okay.
It would still be considered warfare.
Okay.
Maybe with war crimes, but not terrorism in the way we usually define it.
Okay. So the key difference here is that terrorist organizations are usually not governments.
Exactly. China is a country.
Right.
So if they were to do these things, it would be seen as aggression or acts of war, not terrorism.
Okay. So even though they might use different words to describe what they're doing, that doesn't change what it actually is.
Exactly.
Okay. So just to recap, we've got this very real threat happening in the Red Sea from a non-state actor, the Houthis.
Right.
And we've got the U.S. responding to that.
We've talked about how we define terrorism, which usually involves violence by non-state groups against civilians for political reasons.
Yeah.
And we've considered why a country like China wouldn't really be considered a terrorist organization, even if they do things that are harmful and create fear.
Right.
It's a lot to think about.
It is a lot. It shows how much debate and discussion there is around these issues of global security and violence.
It makes you think about those blurry lines between things like aggression, war crimes, and even state-sponsored terrorism.
Absolutely.
Like, what role does a country's intentions play? Who are the targets? What responsibilities do these non-state actors have under international law?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there.
A lot to unpack, for sure. Hey, before we wrap up, a quick shout out to our buddy Micky.
Oh, yeah.
You can find his YouTube channel. It's called Mickytolife.
Love it.
He's got some great travel vlogs. He does whiskey and alcohol unboxings, which are fun.
Yeah, those are good.
And he even posts some of his original music.
Awesome.
Go check it out.
Definitely.
Tell him we sent you.
Yeah. We'll see you guys next time.
See you guys.
Bye.